Hi, I'm Frankie, and in this video, I'm going to go over how you can create an Azure AI agent that's deployed to Microsoft Teams. So you'll have a complete Microsoft Teams AI agent solution. I'm going to go step by step. I'm not going to skip anything. I'm going to create the Azure AI agent in Microsoft Foundry. I'm going to create a backend service in Azure. And then I'm also going to deploy to this service called the bot service, which is necessary to connect to Microsoft Teams. And then you're going to have a Microsoft Teams application that we're going to deploy as well. So we're going to go through everything. It's going to be pretty verbose, but the whole goal here is so that you can see every step that's necessary to build a Microsoft Teams AI agent. Now, if you're already familiar with Microsoft Foundry, you can skip a little bit ahead if you just want to see the Teams implementation steps, but I am going to start from the very beginning. So the first thing I want to do is just talk about some basic concepts. When we think about building some sort of AI solution or just a software solution in general, you generally think of a three-layer architecture where you have a front-end UI, you have a back-end server, and you have some sort of database. Where the front-end UI is what you see, the back-end server is what interacts with your database and gives information to your front-end, and your database is where information is stored. This is where your data is. This is the traditional three-layer architecture that a lot of software solutions for several decades have been following, and then they get more complicated and sophisticated over time with microservices and things like that. When we start looking at our architecture, it's going to look something like this. Not quite the end architecture, but just thinking about how that same beginning architecture maps to what we're doing is we're going to have Microsoft Teams is going to be the end UI that we're looking at. You're going to look at Microsoft Teams to see your agent that you're working with. In the background, there's going to be a backend server using the M365 Agents SDK, which allows you to build Microsoft Teams agents, and you need to have this SDK in order to have the correct protocols set up so that you can interact back and forth with Teams and have proper communication. Behind the scenes, with your M365 SDK, you'll be interacting with your Azure AI agent. So we'll be using Microsoft Foundry SDK to interact in the M365 SDK within this backend service so that you can actually communicate from Microsoft Teams through your backend server to your Azure AI agent. Where your Azure AI agent you could essentially think of as your database or where everything is stored. And really, if you have a complicated Azure AI agent, it's going to have your other RAG solutions or MCP servers, things like that in the background. But this is the super high level general architecture. But this isn't the full story. And the reason is, I mentioned the bot service before, is that when you have Microsoft Teams or other types of messaging solutions where you have things like Trello, Microsoft Teams, Slack, other types of messaging platforms, they all have their own protocol, their own type of messages that they interact with as data types in the background. Well, just like all these tools have their own data types, Microsoft Teams has their data type as well. It's going to have some sort of structure where it says what user it's from, what's in the context, what's in the body of the message that's being sent. But the M365 Agent SDK, it can't create, it doesn't make sense to have all of these different sophisticated protocols stored within the SDK itself. So it really just takes a specific type of protocol called the activity protocol. And it looks something like this, where it takes a service URL and it understands how to work with this specific type of message. And the only way for it to get this specific structure for the activity protocol that the M365 SDK understands is that you need to have some sort of translator in between. That translator is the Azure bot service. So this is going to be a specific Azure service that will deploy that essentially allows whatever is deployed as your Azure app service, which has your M365 Agents SDK, which calls your Azure AI agent, whatever is deployed there can interact with Azure Bot Service to communicate with Microsoft Teams but also communicate with any other channel or messaging platform that Azure Bot Service understands. So that means you could have the same Azure AI agent with the same backend solution using Azure Bot Service, communicating with Microsoft Teams, communicating with Trello, communicating with Slack, communicating with other messaging platforms, as long as Azure Bot Service supports it. Now we're focused on Microsoft Teams, but I just wanted you to make sure that you understood the way this translation is happening, which means our full architecture is going to look something a little more like this. We'll have Microsoft Teams, where we're going to deploy an app to it. We'll have the Azure Bot Service, which will do the translation for Microsoft Teams messaging protocol to something that the M365 Agents SDK understands. And then the M365 Agents SDK is going to be calling the Azure AI agent. Then the responses will filter back through to Microsoft Teams. So this is the architecture. Now we're going to go through step by step. We're going to build each component, and we're going to test each component as well to make sure and verify that it's working properly. The first thing we'll start with is creating our Microsoft Foundry Azure AI agent. So off to the Microsoft Foundry portal. I'm in the Microsoft Foundry portal, and I already have an Azure resource group that's created with currently nothing in it. I'm going to grab this resource group name, then I'm going to go to the Microsoft Foundry portal, and in the Microsoft Foundry portal, which you can get to by going to ai.azure.com, I'll go up to the top, I'll click the existing project that I'm already in, I'm going to create new project. I'll open advanced options, make sure I'm going to the right resource group, and then I'll say Proj, AIS, US2. Make sure I'm plugging the right resource group there. Teams agent demo. Going to change this to MSF for Microsoft Foundry resource demo. And then that all looks good. Recommended resources is going to have an application insights, log analytics workspace set up so that we could do more analytics. I'm okay without that, so I'm going to uncheck this. Then I'm going to create this. And I'll come back when it's done. All right, our project is done. I'll select Let's Go. And now we're within this project that we just created. Brand new project, there's no agents in it. So now I'm going to go to Build at the top right. I'll create my new agent, build an agent. And I'll call this Build Web Search Agent. Create an open playground. I have no models currently deployed. So when creating an agent with no current models, there is a default model that is deployed. Right now, I think that's the GPT 4.1, which we saw on screen. It was currently deploying. So I'll have this basic web search agent that we're going to create. And all it's going to do is just going to be exactly what it sounds like. It's just going to be an Azure AI agent that can search the web and get us information back. I already have a set of instructions that I'm going to give it, that I'm going to paste in here. It's just going to essentially respond to information that we get, try and cite the sources, some basic information that you can put in for a lot of web search agents. So I'm going to save this. And first thing we got to do is test to make sure it works in the Microsoft Foundry portal. So tell me about the Azure Innovation Station online school community. So I have an online school community on the school platform. You can join it for free. There's a link in the description of the video. So I'm asking this web search agent to look up information about it. Looks like it's found some information, which is great. So we know that this is working. I see citations on the bottom. Awesome. So the Azure AI agent is already working. Now we can get this connected to our local version of the backend server we're going to deploy. So now we're going to move to code in Visual Studio Code. Within Visual Studio Code, I have a set of files here. Files that represent our backend server that we're going to first test locally with another testing version of Microsoft Teams called the M365 Agents Playground. So we're going to test this local backend server. which will eventually be deployed to an Azure app service. We're first going to test it locally. We're going to test it against another local front-end environment, a user interface that we'll have locally called the Agents Playground. And we're going to call the real Microsoft Foundry AI agent that we have set up to make sure that our backend server locally and calling our Azure AI agent all works properly. So we have files in Python, files in C#, a manifest file, which we'll talk about later with the Teams application. I get pretty verbose with the steps here in terms of creating a virtual environment and installing the dependencies. These are a couple steps that I've chose to just let you do, but just for your awareness, if I'm within my folder here, I can cd into the Python file, and we can see that I have my virtual environment there that was created when I set up my virtual environment, and I've got packages in there from installing using pip install, but this is Python specific. You can follow the instructions there. I'm going to start with the environment variable. I already have an environment variable .env file, I should say, where my environment variables will go. So the first thing we got to do, if we're going to test this locally, is set up our Foundry endpoint and our agent name. So let's grab those. My agent name from Microsoft Foundry. Add that in. Then get my project endpoint. And then I'm not going to go over this in depth. You can take a look at how the code works when you get access to it. But generally, this is all just setting up the M365 Agents SDK. And then we're just making a simple call to our Microsoft Foundry agent. And that's it. That's all we're doing here. So we're just making a call and getting the response and sending it back to the user. That's it. So if we're going to test this, the first thing we're going to want to do is get the backend up and running. So within my file here, I'm going to start this with Python app.py. So I can see that this is up and running on the default port 3978. And then I have another command here that in order to test this with the M365 Agents Playground, I'm going to need Node.js. And I'm going to run this in the terminal, which is this npx command, which will start up my local Agents Playground to test my backend server. So I'm going to open up another terminal, put this command in here. It'll open up a local playground for creating Microsoft Teams applications and agents. Now within this playground, I see this says, hello, ask me anything. I'll search the web for you. I'm going to respond right now, talking to my agent. Give me information on the Azure Innovation Station and the school community. What is it about? Search the web, tell me about it. And so this, I've already put in my Foundry endpoint, my Microsoft Foundry agent. If this is working, it'll give me information back on the Azure Innovation Station online school community. So let's see if it responds properly. If it does, then we can move on to deploying to our Azure app service. So I can see that I've gotten some information back talking about the Azure Innovation Station school community. Talks about the school platform. Talks about me and the community that I have. So this is working, which is fantastic. We've verified now that the backend server that we have locally before we've deployed it to Azure is working properly. We verified it with a local playground. So I'm going to close that playground. I'll stop the running local server. Our next step now within this process, we verified with our Azure AI agent to make sure that it's working. We've built it already. We already have the app service files. The focus here is to build a Microsoft Teams agent, so we're not going through all the depth on how that backend server works. You'll get access to those files when you download the zip folder that I'll have available on the post within the Azure Innovation Station online community. If you want to get access to all these files, you can take a look there. Now we're going to upload this to an Azure App Service instance in Microsoft Azure, and we're going to test it there to make sure that the same backend service that we have locally is working in the cloud. So for this, we're going to follow a handful of steps. And again, if you want to skip ahead, feel free to. I have a deploy script that I'm going to use in Python, or in PowerShell, sorry. I'm going to put in some information here, and we're going to run this. So I've got my resource group that I've already filled in. I've got the app service name that I'm going to use. This is web app, AIS, EUS2, Teams. We'll call it just Teams agent for each of these. I've gotten the app service plan I'm going to create. The location is going to be East US2. The SKU is going to be basic 1. Our runtime is Python. The start command that we're going to use to make sure our app service knows how to start our application is Python app.py. I have a source directory so that I can set up the zip file properly, so that I'm going to be able to zip my whole folder. I'm not setting up a formal CI/CD pipeline. We're just going to use this zip deploy method, which is quick and easy for demo purposes. So the first thing we got to do is run all this, so it's all saved to our Python environment, or I'm sorry, our PowerShell environment. All right, so that all ran. I'll do that again a little bit more cleanly. All right. Next step is just double checking that we're signed into the account. We are, great. Next step is creating our app service plan. Oh, I have my resource group name incorrect. I think it's Teams AI agent. What went wrong there that time? Oh, it's because I have to rerun this. Let's make sure that is right. So I had to make sure that the resource group was updated. Now I can run that same file again, app service plan create. So now I'm creating the app service plan, which an app service needs in order to actually have compute and storage. I can see that succeeded. Next step is creating the app service itself. All right, looks like I accidentally hit it twice, but I can see that it was created. I have my web app, and just a quick double check in the Azure portal. I want to refresh my resource group. I can see my web app that was created. I can see my app service plan as well as we keep going down the line here on these commands. Now there are a set of different commands that we're going to run for our Python specific web app. The first thing we want to do is be clear on the settings, the environment variables that we're going to set. We are going to need this thing called a client ID, client secret, tenant ID. These are mentioned in the .env file. We're going to purposely leave them blank when we go to test our app service in the cloud. We're going to need these to be filled in when we create what's called an app registration, so that we can connect it to our Azure bot service and thus Microsoft Teams a little bit later on. But for now, we're going to leave them blank so we can test our app service. And we have our environment variables that are going to be added directly to our app service here. So first, let's go ahead and add these to our PowerShell environment. Now those are added. Now we're actually going to configure our app service. We're going to add one more environment variable. This SCM do build during deployment equals true, because the app service itself, when you are using Python, it needs to be able to install all the pip install packages This is essentially telling you that, telling the app that when we send the zip file to app service, it will see this environment variable and go, oh, I have to install all of the pip packages. Without this, you'll try and run your app service and it'll say, hey, we don't have any packages installed. So you're going to want to do this if you're going to do the zip deploy. If you were using CI/CD, you might just add this whenever you want it to also install the Python packages as well. Then we're also going to add this command, which tells our app service what our startup command is, which is that Python app.py. This is also specific to Python because in other programming languages, sometimes there's a default file that will be ran always for that specific language. But for Python, it could be any type of file as the main starting file. And so we have to tell it which file, our app.py, is the main file to start with. So we're going to run each of these. We ran that command to add that environment variable. We'll run this command as well. And just so you know, I'm using this special selection tool where I can hit F8 for any PowerShell command, just subsets of PowerShell commands within Visual Studio Code if you have the PowerShell extension installed. That's how I'm able to run these commands the way I am. That ran as well. Now I'm going to add all of these environment variables to my web app. So that ran as well. And then I'm also going to list them. And for this one, I'm listing all of them except for the secret. I don't need to see the secret. There's nothing in the secret. It should be empty right now. But just a good practice to not list your secrets, which is why I have this here. And so I have these listed. You can see from this command the values that were listed, the different key values, and then the values themselves. And if we also want to verify this in the Azure portal, I can go to my app service. I can go to environment variables, and I can see the same environment variables here. I can show all values. Again, there's nothing in the secret, but these are what we're going to use for the app service. And if you are wondering, why are these, connection, service, connection setting, client ID, client secret, why these weird names, there is a doc that I'll include in the description that talks about how the environment variables should be set up when you're migrating from what was called the Bot Framework SDK to now the Agents SDK. So this is, how are we building Microsoft Teams applications? If you're going to use the Agents SDK, which is what we're using for the backend server, you're going to need to use the right environment variable names, which can be found here in this document. This one is specific for Python, but there's also .NET as well. Again, this will be in the description. So we verified our environment variables are set up for the web app. Our startup command is set, and it knows that it needs to install the Python packages. The last thing we're going to want to do just before we test this is we need to give access to our web app, to get access to Microsoft Foundry. Otherwise, it can't call our Azure AI agent. So we'll make our app service enable its managed identity with this command here. Then we're going to get the name of our Foundry resource. We can see what this looks like by running Foundry scope. Oh, I think it's capital. Well, let's see, maybe something's wrong here. Foundry scope. Okay, I see why just looking at these Foundry scopes, why this Foundry scope is empty is my Foundry endpoint is what it's looking to find my Foundry resource name based on the Foundry endpoint, and then it's trying to find my Foundry scope, which means the actual Microsoft Foundry project that we're trying to assign the managed identity role to, but it's empty because when it was looking at the Foundry endpoint up here, it's using an old URL, not our main Foundry endpoint. It's a URL from previous testing that I did. So I need to update this. So copy this, paste it here, and then run this. Make sure that is saved. And now, if we get our new, we're gonna have to set up our Foundry endpoint again. Just update this. So this is just updating our web app again, making sure we're using the right Foundry endpoint. And again, we can verify that. Refresh this. Look at the value here. And it should say Teams Agent Demo at the end, which it does, which is the correct one. Before it said Teams AI Agent. Now I'll run this command, which would give us our Foundry scope. Foundry scope. And now we can see the scope, which is where the actual Foundry user role assignment that's going to be added to our managed identity for our app service is going to be added. So now we'll create this Foundry user role assignment, basically giving our Azure app service the Foundry user role on our Microsoft Foundry resource. So that was ran. I can see the role assignment that was created. It's a little bit messy, but it exists there. I can verify in the Azure portal. If I go to the overview page, first I can see the identity. This managed identity is turned on. It was turned off previously when I first created this. If I go to the resource group, go to my Microsoft Foundry resource, go to access control, role assignments, and I can see the role assignment that I just created, this Microsoft Foundry user role for the web app that we have. So this is what we just created, this role assignment. Next step here, now that our web app has the role it needs, it has the startup command, it has the environment variables, we're ready to zip the files that we have into a package that we're going to send to app service. And then we're going to deploy to the app service with that zip. So that's all of these commands here. So the deploy is running right now. Okay, our site is starting up. Let's check its status within the Microsoft Azure portal. I'm going to go to the log stream and see that it looks like it is up and running. See a little bit of errors here. Managed identity credential. This is just because our environment variables are not populated right now, but I do have an endpoint on this application. This /health route that allows us to just double check that it's up and running. API/messages is going to be the route when we're actually interacting with our backend services. So let's give this a try. We'll open up the web browser. Let's go to our web app, go to our overview page, grab our web app name in the browser, in the URL. I'm going to put it in and go to health. and we see a status OK in the top right corner here. So our web app is up and running and accepting responses. Now I want to talk about something related to how we actually are going to test this. So a typical service is going to have a front end and a back end and anything else behind there with a database or Azure AI agent in our circumstance. But typically there are APIs that respond back and forth, or application programming interfaces, what they stand for. They respond back and forth using what's called a request response lifecycle, HTTP request response lifecycle. This usually involves a request that is sent to something like the server and a response that is then sent back to the UI. And there's always request responses. Anytime you're using an API. But when you're using Microsoft Teams, it doesn't exactly work like that. Microsoft Teams, when we are using some sort of AI agent, is actually communicating. You're sending two separate HTTP request responses at the same time. So you're going to send a Microsoft Teams request with this thing called a service URL, and you're going to get a response back from your bot server just saying, hey, sounds good. We got your request and we have the service URL that you sent us. That service URL is where we're going to send our next post or our HTTP request with our response. So it's a little bit interesting that there's one request response lifecycle, which is like your request, and then there's another request response lifecycle, which is like the AI agent's response. And it knows what to send that request to, or the response to, that service URL. So the way we'll test this, because we don't have Microsoft Teams set up yet, is that locally we're going to have this Postman desktop app that we're going to use, where we'll send a post request to our running in the cloud app service with a service URL to this testing site called webhook.site. That webhook.site, we're going to give it the service URL in the post body, and our M365 bot server, which is in our app service, running our app service, is going to send its response request to that webhook.site. That way we're able to actually see what the response would have been if we had been in Microsoft Teams, to actually see that the response back from going back and forth with our Azure AI agent. So I have my Postman desktop app, and I'll have links to something like the Postman app to download it in the description, so you can take a look at that. I have this test body that I'm going to be using. The headers are not special or unique because we are just going directly to the app service URL that we're going to have, which is publicly available. And the service URL is the key here in terms of what we give the Azure bot service so that we know how it responds. We have this webhook.site, which again, you can find a link to in the description. Webhook.site, where you're going to get your unique URL, and we'll see responses that are going to end up right here. So I'm going to copy this to my clipboard, go to Postman. This is a unique link that only exists for about 7 days. So even if you tried to use it, you wouldn't be able to get to anything. We've got to populate our app service URL from the cloud. So we'll grab our app service URL from the overview page, add this in Postman. When we send this request, we're hoping to get back just a response 202 that is just acknowledging our response. Then we're going to look at the webhook.site to actually see if the Azure bot service responded or not. And now, because our app service does not have the client ID, client secret, tenant ID filled in, that's how we can get this to work. If these were filled in, then we would get an error, nothing would respond back. If these are blank, then it's in a testing format according to the M365 Agents SDK, so that we can actually test things like this. So let's give this a try. I'll hit send in Postman. I see 202 accepted. For reference, the actual question that we asked was who won the Super Bowl in 2026? A simple web search that our Azure AI agent, that is a web search agent, will be able to answer for us, and an AI model would not be trained on. If we go to webhook.site, we will see that there's 2 post requests in here. If we look at this first one, we see what would be our response from our Azure AI agent, talking about the answer to who won the Super Bowl. And it was the Seattle Seahawks that defeated the New England Patriots 29-13. We see this other post request here because there is some confusion from the bot server as to when the webhook.site sends this response back, the M365 server bot thinks it's another request, and so it tries to send another post request back, which is what this issue or something went wrong is. It thinks that it's trying to send another request, but it's just webhook.site actually sending its response back. So don't worry about that. We are looking at this and it's working. So up until this point, all we've done is build the Microsoft Foundry agent, and we've tested, make sure it works. We built the Azure App Service, and we tested it locally, and then we put it into the cloud, and then we tested it in the cloud. Now we're finally getting to the meat of how a Microsoft Teams agent is actually deployed. And so if you wanted, you could have maybe skipped to this step, and that's okay. If you are, then you've got a backend service that's up and running. You've tested it, and you make sure you know that it works. Now we need to create an Azure Bot Service, and in order to link the Azure Bot Service and the Azure App Service, we need what's called an app registration. This app registration will essentially be the identity for the Azure Bot Service and really the identity for the Microsoft Teams agent that we end up creating. To do this, we'll go to the Azure portal, go back to our resource group. I'm going to type in Entra ID. I'm going to go to app registrations on the side panel here. I'll create a new app registration. Let's call it app reg AAS team agent demo. We'll leave this single tenant only because we're just using it in my tenant here. And then we will register here on the bottom. All right, so now that I have this created, I have this application client ID, this directory tenant ID, and we're going to use these to update our app service and to create our bot service. So in the code, again, I'm going to add these. So I'm going to update my app service using the terminal. So this is my client ID, my tenant ID, and then I need to create a client secret. So I'll go to certificates and secrets, new client secret here. I'll just call this secret. Make sure you use a better name when you are doing this in a real non-demo environment, something that is readable, understandable, you can actually see. Copy the value, you only see it once, make sure you get it. Paste it here. And again, I'm only showing this to you so that you can see it for demo purposes. All these resources are going to get destroyed by the time you see them. So it's okay for me to show these to you. Never share your secrets in public and in real production solutions. Now I'll run these in my PowerShell environment so that they're all saved. Now I'll actually update the environment variables. And then I'll list them here and also double check in the Azure portal. So listing them here, I can see them. the keys and the values, check in the Azure portal. I can go to my web app, go to the environment variables, and see that these values are now filled in. Now we're ready to create our bot service. So within our resource group, let's create a new Azure bot service. I'll type Azure bot, Azure bot. We're going to call it bot AIS EUS2 Teams agent demo. It's in our subscription resource group. Keep it global. I'm going to change the pricing tier to free and select it. I'll keep it a single tenant. And I'm going to use an existing app registration, which is the app registration client ID and tenant ID that we're going to need here from the app registration you just created. Add the tenant ID. Next, review and create. Our deployment is complete. Go to our resource, and now we see our Azure bot here that exists. We're going to go to configuration in the settings. We have our messaging endpoint. This is what we're going to want to update with our app service. So I'll go back to the resource group, go to our web app, grab our web app URL, back to the resource group, back to the bot, configuration, type in HTTPS, our endpoint. And if you remember from looking at the code, the endpoint that is expected for messages like this back to Microsoft Teams is API/messages. Now I'll apply this. Now we should be set up for our bot service to interact with our Azure app service. They both have an app registration, which is the same client ID. The client secret can be found with the bot service when it connects to the app service. Let's test this by using the test in web chat. This is testing to make sure now the bot service is connected to the web app properly. I see the hello, ask me anything. I'll search for you. Tell me about the Azure Innovation Station online school community. And I see a response back, some information about the school community. All right, so this is working now. We have our Azure bot service that is connected to our app service. So now we're on to our last step where we're actually going to create a Microsoft Teams app that points to our Azure bot service so that we can test all of this in Microsoft Teams. So the first step is making sure that this channel translation can work for the bot service. For this to happen, we have to what's called enable the channel, which is Microsoft Teams. So if I go to the bot service, we see on the left, we see channels as a setting, and there's all kinds of different channels. These are different types of chat interfaces that you could use for your bot service to interact with your Azure AI agent that you have in the background. We're going to choose Microsoft Teams. Then we're going to agree to the terms of service. We're going to use Teams Commercial to agree to the other terms of service that are available here. We're not in Teams Government. And with these two simple clicks, we are now good to go to use this bot service in Microsoft Teams. We're now ready to create our manifest file, which is the set of files that are necessary to actually upload to Microsoft Teams to give this a try. I have a set of files in code that you're going to be able to get. And I already have a subset that are filled in. The things that are necessary, I'm going to delete this because I'm going to recreate it right now, is that within this manifest file, let me just zoom in here so you can actually even see it a little bit better, is that a manifest file that is given to Microsoft Teams to create a Teams app is composed of three things. there are two images that are used for the icons for your Microsoft Teams app, and then the manifest file itself. The manifest file itself is just pointing to information regarding your Microsoft Teams app. So the Microsoft Teams app that I've already partially filled in, I've already partially filled in my developer name, the name that is a short name and long name, the description, short description, long description. I've just put in some dummy info, but you'll be able to see from the zip file, where you can put in more information there. But I've already pre-filled in some of that info. So the stuff I need to fill in will be the client ID for my app registration, both as the main ID of my Teams app and the name of the bot ID, which should be the same. And also the website URL, privacy URL, terms of service URL, which I'm just going to use as my backend service. But if you have an official privacy and terms for your actual Microsoft Teams agent, that's what you would put here as well. I'm also going to have to add the app service URL as my valid domain so that the Teams application actually knows where it's calling for this Microsoft Teams agent. So in my deploy file, I'm going to grab my client ID. I'm going to go back to my manifest file and add this client ID here. And save that. I'm going to go to my resource group, to my web app, to get the domain for my web app. Back in the code, I'm going to update the actual app name itself, or rather the URL for my backend service. I have the permissions set up for the way the individuals can access this app for Teams. I list the icons that are going to be used, which are also associated with your manifest file, any additional colors or configurations that you can set up as well. I do have a set of instructions that talk about how these manifest files work and how they're set up. You'll be able to get this as well. We are going to run this compress zip command in order to create the package zip that we're going to give to Microsoft Teams to test this. So this is all filled out. Now let's run this command, the compress zip, path, the manifest. Oh, let's make sure we're in the right folder. So we're going to exit, get out of this Python file, enter into the manifest filled folder where we just put in all of our information. Now we're going to paste in this command to create our zip file. So now I just created my bot app zip right here. This is the actual zip file that we're going to send to Microsoft Teams. Now I'm going to open up Microsoft Teams. And in Microsoft Teams, I'm already in my apps section within Teams, where I came over to apps. Now I'm going to come down to manage your apps on the bottom left corner here. I'll select manage my apps. Then I'll select upload an app. This might not be available for you. You might need to ask your Teams admin to give you upload an app access. If this isn't available, then you just need to get that permission. Upload an app, and I'm going to upload a custom Teams app. The other alternatives is if you're an admin. I'm an admin for my org, so I'm able to just upload an app directly. You probably won't see this unless you're a Teams admin, and then you're able to submit an app to your org. If this is available, this is what you'd actually use to submit the final product after you've tested it, assuming you also have the upload a custom app available. So I'm going to upload a custom app, select my Teams app.zip. Now I see that my app showed up here. I'm going to add this. Added successfully. I want to open it and give it a test. Tell me about the Azure Innovation Station online school community. And we see that information comes back here. So now all of this is because we are going through Microsoft Teams to the Azure Bot Service, to the Azure App Service, where these two are connected via an app registration. Then the Azure AI agent that is within using the Microsoft Foundry SDK within the M365 Agents SDK. And then responses are being sent back via another post that's actually occurring from the app service to the bot service to Microsoft Teams. And just to prove again how this works all from one end to the other, I'm going to have my Microsoft Teams app here, where I'm going to make a change to the agent. Right now it just speaks normal, but let's go back to our agent itself. And I'm say something like, always respond in a pirate tone. And I'll save this. And then we'll go to Microsoft Teams. And tell me about who won the Super Bowl in 2026. And we see it starts off, ahoy matey, avast, and it speaks in a silly tone, similar to the way a pirate might speak. So now if you're happy with the way you've tested it, then your next step would be to go to that upload an app and submit the app to your org, where your team's admin can then approve of the app itself so that more people can get access to your app. They can help you based on your company's permissions and policies so that a Teams app can actually be used by others within your organization. Those are all the steps to build an Azure AI agent for Microsoft Teams. We went step by step from the very start to the very end and tested every step in between. Now, that might have been a little long, and I apologize if you didn't want to see all that. Hopefully you skipped forward if you only wanted to see the parts that were most important to you. If you want to get the files that are all here, you can get them in a zip folder that's going to be associated with a post in the Azure Innovation Station online community with this video. There's a link to join in the description. If you want to learn more about in-depth how to build Azure AI agents, I also have a periodic cohort program on how to build Azure AI agents in 30 days or less. Right now, I think there's a waiting list in the description of the video for the next one. If you want to get notified first thing, I only limit it to a certain amount of individuals. So if you will sign up on that waiting list, I'll reach out to you before I reach out and make it public to the masses, if you will. If you have any questions about this video, feel free to put them in the comments below. I answer every comment to help as many people as I can. And if this video was helpful for you, I'd appreciate if you liked the video and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more content like this. As always, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.